Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I've been mowing lawns in my neighborhood since I was 12 years old to make some extra cash. When I started, I would go door to door offering my services for a reasonable price, $20 per lawn. It was a great way for me to start working and earning my own money. Most of my neighbors were really nice about it. They understood that I was just a kid trying to learn about responsibility and hard work. Some even gave me tips or offered me snacks and drinks while I worked. It made the job fun and rewarding. As the years went on, I got better and faster at mowing lawns. By the time I was 16, I had built up a reliable set of customers around the neighborhood. I even bought my own lawnmower and weed whacker with the money I had earned. Mowing lawns after school and on weekends became my little business. When I was 17, a new family moved into the neighborhood, the Johnsons. They seemed nice enough at first. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson introduced themselves and asked if I did lawn care. I gave them my standard rate of $20, and they were happy to hire me. The first few weeks went fine. I came every Saturday morning to mow their front and back lawns. But then Mrs. Johnson started getting demanding. She would come outside while I was working and nitpick little things. "You missed a spot over there." "Make sure you edge along the driveway perfectly." "Did you trim the bushes last time?" "Do it this week." I started to dread going to their house on Saturdays. But I needed the business, so I put up with Mrs. Johnson's nagging and demands. One Saturday, I came to mow their lawn and noticed the grass was extremely long. It had clearly not been mowed in 3 weeks. I figured maybe they went on vacation and just forgot to tell me. When I finished, I knocked on the door to let Mrs. Johnson know I was done. She came outside, looked around, and frowned at me. "This was a really sloppy job today," she said in an accusatory tone. "The lawn is still uneven in spots, and I noticed some weeds you missed." I was taken aback. I tried to explain that the grass had gotten too long, which made it harder to get an even cut. But she interrupted me. "No excuses. We pay you to do a job, and I expect you to do it properly." I apologized and promised I would try harder next time. I knew arguing would get me nowhere with her. The following Saturday, I made sure to come early so the grass wouldn't be too overgrown. I mowed in a careful pattern and edged the driveway and walkways meticulously. I even spot-treated a couple of dandelions. It looked immaculate, but again, Mrs. Johnson came out shaking her head, pointing out imperfections that were barely noticeable. She insisted I redo the side yard. It was already 95 degrees outside, and I had been working non-stop for 2 hours, but I redid the side yard as she demanded. I was at my wit's end dealing with her unreasonable behavior. The final straw came a couple weeks later. I knocked on their front door after finishing the lawn as usual. Mrs. Johnson opened the door, looked past me at the lawn, and said, "That doesn't look like you did a full mow. The grass still looks too long. You'll have to come back tomorrow and do it again." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mrs. Johnson," I said politely, "the grass is definitely cut to the proper length. I made sure to do a thorough job today." "Don't argue with me," she snapped. "You expect to get paid for this kind of subpar work?" I stood there in shock. It finally dawned on me that she was fishing for ways to get free lawn care out of me. "Mrs. Johnson," I said firmly, "the lawn looks perfect. I will not be coming back tomorrow to remow it. If you'd like to find another lawn service provider, feel free, but my rate is $20 per mow as we agreed." Her face contorted in anger. "How rude! Don't you want to keep me as a customer? All I'm asking for is a little extra care for my lawn." I shook my head. "I've already put in extra care I won't be taken advantage of anymore." I turned and walked to my mower to pack up my things. Mrs. Johnson stormed off shouting, "You haven't heard the last of me." I finished the rest of my mowing jobs for the day, happy to be done with the Johnson house. The next afternoon, I was working in my garage when 2 police cars pulled up outside. 2 officers approached me. "Are you Jake?" one asked. I said yes. "We need you to come to the station with us for questioning about an assault complaint we received." "Assault?" I said in shock. There must be some mistake, but they insisted I had to come to the station. Completely confused, I rode to the station with them. Why would anyone accuse me of assault? I didn't get into fights or even play rough sports. At the station, they led me to an interrogation room. I sat nervously wondering what was happening. A few minutes later, a detective came in and sat across from me. "We got a call this morning from a Mrs. Anna Johnson at 555 Oak Street. She claimed that after you mowed her lawn yesterday, you got confrontational with her about payment. She alleges that you shoved her and punched a wall in anger before getting in your truck and speeding off. My jaw dropped. I instantly realized this was the work of that deranged Mrs. Johnson. That is absolutely false, I said angrily. I would never assault anyone. She got mad at me yesterday for refusing to remow her lawn for free. I told her I wouldn't be taken advantage of anymore and left. That's all that happened. The detective studied me for a moment. Can anyone corroborate that you were elsewhere at the time she claimed the assault occurred? I was working in my garage all afternoon. Ask my mom and dad. And why would I have mowed her lawn again if I was already mad at her for trying to get it for free? The detective nodded. I see. We'll need to get a full statement from you, but the details don't seem to line up with Mrs. Johnson's report. After I gave my official statement, my parents came to the station as character witnesses. They were furious that I had been dragged there under false pretenses. The detective apologized for the misunderstanding and said they would investigate Mrs. Johnson for filing a false report. With the lack of evidence and my solid alibi, it was clear I was telling the truth. A few days later, I got a notice in the mail that Mrs. Johnson and her family had abruptly moved out of the neighborhood. I can only assume she was scared of facing charges for her blatantly false accusations. I eventually saved up enough money to start my own landscaping company. If there's one thing I learned from this crazy experience, it's to be wary of entitled, manipulative people, and to trust my instincts when a customer seems dishonest. I hope Mrs. Johnson eventually got her just desserts. But I'm just glad I got out of that situation without it ruining my reputation or getting a criminal record. I can look back now and laugh about the lengths she was willing to go just to get out of paying $20 for lawn care. Some people are just unbelievable. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So, this weekend I was supposed to pick up my mom from my grandparents' place since my dad was out of town, and the place is 100 kilometers away from our city. Mom has a driver's license but does not drive. Since I don't trust my car to leave the city with it, I proceed to take my dad's car, that he left at home, to go pick up Mom. Since I would not be using my own car for the duration, I decide to give it to my girlfriend to go shopping and such while I am gone. So we wake up Sunday morning, we live together, get in my car, and I drive us to my parents' place to pick up my dad's car. I leave in my dad's car and my girlfriend leaves in mine. I don't even make it out of the city, and I get a call from her asking if I could come back since she had been in an accident. I head back since the site of the accident was at the very end of the street we lived on. Once I get there, I find out that once she reached the end of the street, she made a right turn and hit the first two cars parked on the right. Honestly, I didn't know how to contain my laughter. I mean, hitting a parked car. No, two parked cars. That takes skill. So I proceed to talk with the owners of the cars and offer to pay for everything since my girlfriend was at fault. I had no problem going to the police, except for the 3-6 hour waiting time every time you go to the accidents department, but offered to fill out an amicable form. This is something we have in my country, where if you have an accident, both sides just fill out the form and be on their way without contacting the police. I live in the capital city, and we get lots of accidents on a daily basis. Since it was Sunday, and all the insurance places were closed, I could not acquire such a form, so I proceeded to let them photograph my insurance, exchanged phone numbers, and assured them that we were neighbors, and that tomorrow, Monday, I would contact them with the form to fill it out. All is fine, and I leave for my grandparents' place. On the way there, I contact a friend that works for insurance, and he emails me a form along with a reference for a service station that would have their cars repaired in a day. I proceed to call the guys and tell them that I will be back in a couple of hours with the form and we will get everything settled today. To this, one of the guys says, in his position, he is entitled to go to the police, so he will be waiting for us there should we decide to come. This is where I pulled a 180. So I was trying to be a decent human being and repair the damage my girlfriend caused, and this guy wanted to waste 3-6 hours of my Sunday because he felt entitled. Fine. At this point, it may be useful to mention that I have studied law to a master's degree, I have the degree, and have been working at law firms for over 5 years, so I pretty much know the laws better than the cops. Karma starts to kick in. I call the guys on the way back from my grandparents and ask them to grab a copy of the form that needs to be filled out for me as well. These forms have a number order on them, and first come, first serve. They tell me they cannot since there is only one per person. This is nonsense. I know this for a fact. When you ask for such a form, the cops even ask if the other party is here to give one for them too. Regardless, I get there after they had been waiting for about 2-3 hours and request a form. They had numbers 56 and 57, and I had 89. Mind you, each case takes about 20-30 minutes, lazy individuals. So when their numbers come up, I was just getting my form, and as they enter the office, I also enter and ask the cop, I am also a part of this incident as it was a three-way accident. Should I not also be here when you talk to the other two parties? The cop proceeds to tell the guys to go out of his office and come back when all three of us have filled out the report. The guys proceed to wait another 30 minutes for my girlfriend to fill out the report, and then we all go in once she is done. Now we get to the core of the problem. The most incompetent police officer I have ever seen. I am sure even those among you with no legal background or knowledge will see how pathetic this guy is. People who filed reports, the other two guys, one of them did not even have a driver's license because it was his mom's car, and his girlfriend filled the report. The other guy had a driver's license and filed his report, although the car belonged to his parents. This is relevant since the only people legally allowed to file that report are either the owner of the car or the person driving it at the time, which none of these two were. The cop finds my girlfriend guilty, as she truly was, for goodness sake, and proceeds to fill out the paperwork. I ask him, Officer, do you know the regulations for parking on the street this incident happened on? No. And do you not think it is relevant to the case? Now, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was all gibberish, ending up with, you really dislike cops, don't you? To which I answer, I dislike incompetent individuals in any profession. He ends up getting his way since he was the authority in the situation and proceeds to ticket my girlfriend and hand the guys copies of my insurance to get their cars fixed. Edit. Small detail I left out. The cop did not take pictures of the damaged cars, as is mandatory by law for any case that comes across his desk. He literally has no evidence an accident ever happened apart from the word of the other two guys. I'm sure that any policeman reading this would have a field day. Cue karma. As soon as I get home, I start to do exactly what society and my profession taught me. Sue him. I filed the lawsuit on Monday and got a date in 4 months. Litigation in non-penal cases is very slow in my country. The usual time to finish a lawsuit is anywhere between 1 and 8 years, depending on how much your lawyer wants to push it. The thing is that she was, in fact, at fault, and had they just taken me up on my offer and not wasted my time, they would have had their cars fixed by now, Tuesday, but they were entitled to go to the police. Fact: parking regulations on that street, as any other for that matter, state that cars should be parked parallel to the sidewalk. Not on it, not perpendicular, parallel. The street has a few apartment buildings, so there is nowhere near enough parking places, so the neighbors made a convention to park perpendicular to the sidewalk to fit more cars, taking up a whole lane of traffic, but that's another story. The thing with conventions is that it's all fine and dandy until something happens, and the police get involved. Then, the law states you must take responsibility for what happened. So basically there is no chance whatsoever that we will lose the lawsuit, and I will even drag it out as much as possible. I'm thinking I could get it up to 4-5 years, no problems. Now another kink is a law that states that any item that is under litigation does not produce legal effects. In translation, this means that until the judge gives a verdict to my lawsuit, the ticket is suspended, so the guys will not be able to fix their cars, not even on their own dime. It is somewhat assimilated to evidence, but at a much lower scale. Also, once the process is over, not only will I not be paying for their repair, they will be paying for mine. My main argument in the lawsuit is a legal concept known as a causality link, which applied to my case means, yes, my girlfriend caused an accident, but that accident was caused by you parking your cars illegally. If you would have parked legally, there would have been more room. Your car would not have been in that spot, and thus would not have been hit regardless of my girlfriend's actions. So basically, your action of parking perpendicularly caused the damage to my car. Don't know if it's pro, but surely is revenge I had to enact it over years. The next one is a petty revenge story. I am a grocery store cashier for a very small chain in southeastern Michigan. For 6 hours a day, 4 days a week. I ring order after order of groceries. Believe me, it gets monotonous. About a week or two ago, it was a super busy day. I had been going non-stop for 2 hours with no time between customers. That's when, during the short 5-minute lull that miraculously arrived, Karen came along. I went through my usual spiel, "Hi, how are you, paper or plastic, etc.," and started ringing her groceries. She had a lot of fruits and veggies, which is cool, better than some of the things I have to ring, don't ask seriously. And then came the grapes. Now don't get me wrong, I love grapes. Sweet, crunchy, tart, and they don't require really any prep before you can eat them. Yum. No, my issue was with the large spider that was in the bag with the grapes. I have a serious spider phobia. When I was a kid, a spider, no idea which kind, we were on a family biking trip through a nearby nature trail when it happened, bit me on the arm, and over the course of a few days, my parents just thought it was a mosquito bite at first, it swelled up into a big, hard lump the size of a softball. I still vividly remember the night they finally realized that they needed to take action and rushed me to the nearest hospital ER. Traumatizing. Ever since I can't see a spider without shrieking and freezing up. Any other bug in the house? No problem. I see a spider, one of my brothers has to come rescue me. So, as you can imagine, the large bag of grapes spider did not go over well. I managed to mostly quell the shriek, instead letting out a strangled yelp, and jolted back from the register and defending bag, and refused to touch it again until the spider was very dead. My grocery store is one of those that still has a separate bagger job, so I wasn't alone at the register. The very nice kid who was my current bagger was kind enough to come around and remove the spider-infested sack of fruit, and went to get Karen a new bag. I apologized and started to scan again, and as soon as he left, the ridicule began. "It was just a spider, why did you freak out?" Are you seriously telling me that a grown-ass woman had to have a teenage boy rescue her from an itsy-bitsy spider? How pathetic, just get over it, it was the size of a pea at best. I carried that bag all the way over here. I'm scared of spiders and I was just fine. You shouldn't have had an issue swiping it and moving on for 5 seconds. And so on and so forth. Meanwhile, I just had to sit there and smile at her. As soon as he came back, she shut up and was all smiles and compliments for such a nice young man. That was where I decided to get petty. Now, in my store, produce is rung one of 2 ways. It might be the same everywhere, I don't know, but anyway. It is either rung up by count or by weight, so we have a scale built into the register to weigh items. Grapes are priced by weight, so I went ahead and dropped the nice new spider-free bag on the scale. And while I typed in the produce code, I made sure to ever so stealthily place my thumb on that scale and apply the slightest bit of pressure, magically turning 2 pounds 7 ounces into 4 pounds 2 ounces. And at $3.99 per pound, it made a difference. Mind you, Karen had a huge order so that 1 pound 7 ounces didn't noticeably affect the total. But if Karen was going to mock me like that, then turn around like she'd done nothing wrong and praise my coworker, she was going to have to pay for it. And pay for it she did. The next one is a malicious compliance story. It was 2005, and the lady I had met over the internet had visited me in Australia, and I had visited her in the USA, meeting her folks and all that. She had now come to be with me, and we had married. However, since arriving to stay, she had encountered a lot of problems as her vocational college degree was not recognized in Australia, leaving her with difficulties getting a job. She was determined and flexible, though, and did some temp jobs, clerical, receptionist kind of things, using skills she had learned while working at college as a librarian. She finally got a real job as a receptionist clerk at a company that brokered loans, and she got on with things. One thing that was always a problem was that sales reps sharks would have their clients come in and they would tell the women to make coffees for them. That wasn't part of their role, so my wife and her coworkers were told that they were not to do that. It was up to the salesperson to make the coffee for themselves and their clients. This was part of an initiative to try to retrain women in these roles as they didn't tend to stay long in what was something of an anarchic office. So my wife was working and a salesman's, they called them financial advisors, but they were the credit business version of the used car salesman class. Client came in and she buzzed the guy. He came out and told her to make them both coffees. She tried to be discreet but said that he knew she couldn't do that. He blew up, went to her supervisor, and she told my wife to make the coffees. Later, she had her in the office and fired her. Yep, she was fired for trying to do as she was told, the opposite of malicious, I guess. But karma comes in anyway. She was fired, but asked to stay on until they got another person to replace her. For the next 2 months, she continued to go to work, now able and ready to refuse anything she didn't want to do, especially the coffee making. The same guy tried once. She said no, so fire me. They could not find a replacement. Word of their issues at that company had gotten around the receptionist clerical field locally. Then she was offered a much better job with some real responsibility and standing, and almost 30% more salary. She walked into the office the next day and told them she was leaving at the end of the day. No notice required, of course, and they still had not found a replacement, and did not find one for months more, by which time they were trying to replace 2 of them. Eventually, the company let the woman supervisor go and initiated sensible rules. My wife never looked back, but we still have a chuckle 18 years later at how well getting fired worked out for her, and how badly it ended for the supervisor who fired her staff for obeying the rules. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.